You're watching Cable 2.
Hi, this is your show, Tu Comunidad. One of the things that we try to do, or Lavoz de la Escuela, is a show that is totally in Spanish. But today we want to try to do this show just in English at this version, so all of our counselors and other personnel can understand what DACA is and what's going on with it. We have with us attorney Mark Atkinson, and I'm going to let Mark almost talk about it all the time so we can really get out there and help our kids that are DACA students. He will first explain what DACA is for those of you who have never heard the term before. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Miriam. Very good.
Mark, can you just give us a quick word about what DACA is all about?
Absolutely. So DACA is a program that was established by President Obama in June of 2012. And essentially, it is not any permanent legal status, but it is a authorization by the president to allow certain younger people that are not U.S. citizens to remain in the United States without fear of deportation. It also includes the ability to get a work permit, which will then allow them to have a social security number and a driver's license. It's essentially a 2-year protection from deportation, along with these other benefits, including work permit, and as I said, the ability to get a driver's license.
Mark, I understand that 800,000 students have gotten the DACA documents. Now, President Trump made an announcement. What is that announcement?
So, as I mentioned, DACA is valid for 2 years, and it could be renewed every 2 years. So on September the 5th, 2017, President Trump said that he is actually phasing out the entire DACA program. And by that, he meant that no new initial DACA applications are going to be received after September the 5th, 2017. And those who already have an approved DACA status, those are going to be allowed to expire as their expiration dates come. So at the very latest, it would be 2 years from the last DACA approval that those would expire. Trump's announcement did not invalidate somebody who has DACA. So their DACA status would continue until the date that it expires. And there's some other details that we'll get to. But essentially, the Trump administration said that they are going to phase that program out. They did not offer any long-term solution or alternative, and we are waiting to see if perhaps Congress is going to pass something that will give these 800,000 people, as you mentioned, some way of getting another legal status in the United States.
Now, so that means that if I have never, ever applied for DACA, and I do have, let's say I did have the opportunity to do so, can I still do so?
Not if your application was not submitted on September the 5th, 2017. So if you're planning on submitting your initial application after September 5th, 2017, it will not be accepted.
Okay.
And that affects quite a few young people, especially in school, who are turning 15 years old, because the DACA program did not allow you to apply for it until you turned 15. So, for example, if a student turned 15 on September the 6th, 2017, and was ready to submit their initial DACA application, they would not be able to do so because the cutoff was September the 5th, 2017. Now, those who have applied for their initial DACA status and their application was pending on September the 5th, 2017, those applications will be allowed to continue in the process.
Okay.
Hopefully they'll be approved and they will receive a 2-year DACA approval. So they could potentially have DACA approved for up to 2019, perhaps, if they get approved. But if it hasn't been submitted as of September 5th, 2017, you cannot submit a new one for your first DACA status.
Okay, so then now let's talk about if I do have DACA already, what does the announcement mean for me?
Okay, so if you have already been approved for DACA, the announcement means that only certain people can submit a renewal application. And this is very important. The people who can still submit their renewal application are those whose DACA will expire on or before March the 5th, 2018. So a person who has DACA, if they pull out their work permit or their approval notice that they received for DACA, if the date of their expiration of DACA is March 5, 2018 or before, then they can still submit a renewal application for another 2 years. But they have to submit that renewal application on or before October the 5th, 2017, which essentially means they have a 1-month window from Trump's announcement to file their renewal. Now, those folks who have DACA but their expiration date is after March 5th, 2018 will not be allowed to renew. So their DACA status will continue until the date of expiration that's on the card, but they will not be able to submit any renewals.
Wow. So October the 5th is just around the corner.
That's right.
So this is something that has to really go quickly.
I encourage everybody who has been approved for DACA, pull out your work permit, look at the date of expiration, and if that date is March 5, 2018 or before, you need to take immediate action before October 5th, 2017 to file your renewal.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something, work permit. What happens to my work permit? Let's say I'm already working somewhere. What happens to me?
You know, a lot of the DACA folks, the dreamers that we call, they've already graduated from high school. Some of them have even graduated college, and they have careers established. They're working, doing very well. And there's a lot of uncertainty about, so what's going to happen with my work status. The work permit continues to be valid until the date of expiration, just like your DACA status. So that means that potentially, if you just recently renewed, your work permit could continue up through 2019 even. But whatever the date of expiration on that work permit, that is the last date that you're legally authorized to work in the United States. The question then becomes, well, what do I tell my employer? Or do I tell my employer anything? Generally, it is not the responsibility of the worker to provide that new information to the employer. It should be the employer who comes to the employee and asks for that information. So although it varies from one employer to another as to how often they ask for updated information, generally it is not the responsibility of the employee to provide that additional information. My advice generally is wait and allow your employer to ask you for what is going on with your status, what's going on with your work authorization, and then if they ask you, that's when you would have that conversation.
Okay. That's the work permit, but I also have a driver's license.
Yes.
What happens to my driver's license?
We haven't heard anything directly from the North Carolina Department of Division of Motor Vehicles, but what we do know is that the driver's license generally has the same date of expiration that the work permit has. So a person who has approved DACA will probably have a driver's license with an expiration date the same date that their DACA status expires. As far as we know, every time that you renew your driver's license, you have to show them the new work card. So as far as we know, you would not be able to renew your driver's license after that expiration date also. That means, and this is very unfortunate, that folks who are perfectly good drivers, who have passed all the tests for driving, who've had a license and never had any problems, suddenly are going to not have the ability to drive in North Carolina, as well as not have the ability to work. What's going to happen with these folks? That's uncertain, but as of now, we know that you won't be able to renew it. So that's a big problem for us. It's a big problem for the state, and it needs to be addressed by Congress.
Now, it'll expire, my license. Can I still use it as an identification?
I recommend that you still carry
Keep
it
it.
and you still show it as needed. Now, it has expired, that would be correct. However, it would be up to an individual officer if you were to be asked for ID, let's say by a police officer. The officer can make the decision whether they're going to go ahead and rely on that for a form of identification. Now, when it comes to showing your ID in other things, such as if you went to the bank, something like that, and you needed to show ID, many times they won't accept an expired driver's license. So my recommendation is to have a passport, because the passport can always be renewed. And that passport, of course, would be from your country of origin. And you can renew that regardless of your immigration status. The other thing I recommend is one of the IDs that are often provided by organizations such as Faith Action. There's some other organizations that have done these ID card drives. Or the Matrícula Consular, if you're from Mexico, is another form of ID that you could use that could be renewed, and therefore you'd have a valid form of ID. But the driver's license, once it expires, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis whether someone would agree to accept that or not.
Now, there's another question. As you well know, I work with Crosby Scholars, and one of the big questions is, how does it affect my enrollment in school?
This is a big question, and it's going to depend a lot on where you're going to school or wanting to go to school. A couple things that we know for sure. When you have DACA and you apply for your Social Security number, you will receive a Social Security number that is yours. It is valid, and that remains with you for your entire life, regardless of what happens with DACA or your immigration status. That Social Security number is yours, assigned to you for your entire life. So when DACA is phased out, that number is still your number. And if you're applying for a scholarship or you're applying for schools and they ask you for your Social Security number, that is your Social Security number forever. So by all means, continue to report that as your number, because it is yours. Okay. When it comes to other things such as your ability to pay tuition, your eligibility for scholarships, those things generally break down into whether it's a private school or it's a public school. We have a lot of kids who are very fortunate to get scholarships to private universities and colleges. They would need to talk to their college or university and be forthcoming about the situation and ask, because generally private universities are not bound by the same rules as public universities when it comes to immigration status. And so we think there's still a lot of possibility to enroll and study in private schools even without DACA. When it comes to the public universities, and I know there are many, many kids who are studying in the community college system, generally your tuition, even with DACA, would have to be out-of-state tuition, is what I understand. And that may or may not still be possible. But by all means, don't limit yourself. Don't eliminate yourself from the ability to study. Continue to apply, continue to seek scholarships, and try every way possible to study where you want to study and what you want to study. If you're a dreamer and you have dreams, by all means, don't let this announcement cause you to abandon your dreams of education and of a career. And that's the way I look at it. Let the school tell you whether or not you're eligible. Don't be the one who says, I'm probably not eligible, therefore I'm just not going to pursue it.
And that's true, because that's one of the things that is happening right now with our high school students. I went to one of our high schools a couple of weeks ago, And I went over to a group of boys that I saw in a corner and I said, hey guys, any of you a Crosby Scholar? They looked at me straight in the face and said, Miss Miriam, what for? I'm already in the 10th grade. They're not going to give me DACA. I'm not going to be able to study. So it's really something that the kids are now kind of pulling back. As Crosby Scholars, we've been trying, no, don't do that. The same thing that you just said. Don't do that. You have that dream. You can keep on. And we're looking into private colleges.
Yeah.
Going out to the private colleges, we already have an appointment with Salem College, who has really stepped up and helped us a lot. Guilford College, even Wake Forest University, to kind of give us a hand and say, look guys, this can still happen, okay? Because we have very, very smart students with us. I had a girl coming into my office yesterday with a 4.5.
Wow.
So you're saying, how in the world are we going to keep that child out of a high school? Okay? So between the lawyers, ourselves as Crosby Scholars, we're trying our best to continue to keep those kids. We do not need to be taking that dream away from them when we can find ways to get them through. Now, there's a big question. Am I going to be deported?
This was one of the major concerns initially when DACA started. If I give the government my information, is this all a hoax and I'm going to be deported? And then later with this announcement by Trump, okay, they're phasing out DACA. Are they going to give the information to ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for deportation? There have been a lot of mixed messages, but essentially we can say with almost certainty, the fact that you had DACA is not going to cause you to be deported. That is something that the community needs to know. Having DACA and DACA being phased out is not going to cause someone to be deported. DACA is, to get DACA, you have to already pass through some of the most stringent background checks that there are. You could even get your green card or citizenship with certain things on your criminal past that you couldn't get DACA with. So DACA already has set the bar extremely high as far as a criminal background or a past. So these are the best of the best, the ones who have DACA. Now, having said that, if you do commit a crime or you are arrested for a crime and charged and you had DACA and now it's expired or it's expiring, you could get into a situation of deportation. But that exists regardless of DACA. That exists whether you are documented or not documented. So essentially, don't be afraid that the fact that you applied and were approved for DACA is alone going to cause you to be deported, because it's not.
Okay, that's really good to know, because it's 800,000 individuals that got that. So these, like you said, the best of the best.
That's right. And if you talk to officers from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they would tell you privately that there is no physical way to deport 800,000 former DACA holders. Many of them already have married or have kids born and are being raised here. What are you going to do with the family members? What are you going to do with the children?
Correct.
So not only because the DACA folks are good people, but also because of the family situations, there is just no physical way that there could be a deportation of 800,000 DACA holders.
Of course, you know how much money that would take?
Well,
Can I still travel? Because that was one of the things that DACA recipients could do, was really travel and get a permit to go visit family.
Right.
Can that still be done?
That can no longer be done unless you already had a travel permit approved on September 5th, 2017. So essentially what DACA said, with DACA you can't travel, but you can actually ask for a special permit to travel. And if you have already submitted an application for that permit before September 5th, 2017, they are going to return it and say, sorry, we're not issuing any more travel permits. The only exception is if you already had your travel approved on September 5th, 2017, you can go ahead and travel and come back. I do recommend, though, before you travel, that you should speak to an immigration lawyer, because there are other issues that can come up with travel that you need to know about before you go abroad and plan to come back.
Thank you. Now, what should I know? What are those answers that I would need, points, dates that I would need to be able to continue after this situation?
Well, the most important thing you need to know is, when does your DACA status expire? And as we mentioned before, if it expires on or before March 5th, 2018, you still have a window of 1 month to file a renewal application. That's the number one thing you should do. Apart from that, the next thing that I recommend that you do is get involved in national organizations that are pushing for immigration reform or the DREAM Act. There's a very good organization called United We Dream. They have a website, and they will tell you what they are doing on a national level to try to resolve this problem. There is also a lot of talk about some legislation to be passed that will bridge those who have DACA that's expiring over to something that's a more permanent status, such as a green card. That is something that they have said would need to take place before this 6-month period that the Trump administration mentioned, which ends in March of 2018. But you just need to be aware of what's going on nationally to see if there's going to be a solution to this problem. And the other thing is, don't be afraid. This country, regardless of whether you have documents or not, these kids have grown up in this country. They have invested in this country. We have invested in them in this country. And they have shown tremendous potential. As we mentioned earlier, they are the best of the immigrants that come to this country. And don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by what's going on, and be informed so you can see what may come out of this. And we're hoping that something on a permanent basis comes out of this.
Wonderful. Now, Mark, one of the things that I also have seen is this little card that's called Know Your Rights. Should people carry that around with them so at least they could feel a little bit more comfortable and say, okay, well, I know?
Yes, because there's a lot of fear in the community, or uncertainty, I should say, about whether local law enforcement is trying to enforce immigration laws. And what people need to realize is that one of the beauties of this country is, if you live here, you have certain constitutional rights that, regardless of whether you have DACA, DACA's taken away, you have status, you don't have immigration status, that you have certain rights. And one of those is the Know Your Rights card that a lot of people have or are interested in having. And that essentially lets you know what your legal rights are, and those rights are extended by the Fourth Amendment to everybody who lives here, regardless of status. I always tell people, the number one thing you need to know is that the local law enforcement officers are not interested in your immigration status. They are busy trying to protect the community and fight crime and enforce the criminal laws. They are probably not interested in your immigration status. So number one, be respectful to police officers. Don't assume that they have bad intentions, but don't be afraid to assert your rights in a respectful way. If you have one of the Know Your Rights cards, those rights include, of course, the right to remain silent. You have the right to be in your home without warrantless searches and seizures. You have the right to your person and your vehicle not being searched without a warrant. Those are the rights that we're all somewhat familiar with. And people need to realize that that extends regardless of your immigration status. And don't be afraid to, in a respectful way, assert those rights and to make sure that you feel comfortable with what's going on.
Mark, if someone, be it a school counselor or a teacher, has some more questions, where can they contact you? A website, an email, somewhere they can ask those questions so they can help their students?
Well, certainly they can contact me. I practice here in Winston-Salem. It's the Atkinson Law Firm. We have a website which is mtalaw.com, or they could just search for me online. There are a number of really good immigration lawyers here in Winston-Salem. All of us are dealing with this problem. We've all been very involved in DACA and really felt great about what DACA did for so many young people. And now that we're on the back end of this DACA situation, we're trying to help our students and our clients any way that we can. But of course, there are all kinds of other organizations that are also trying to help out, and sometimes they don't know the legal side of things. So I'd always encourage them to either contact me or contact another local immigration attorney, and we can certainly inform them of what they need to know to the extent that we can help.
I do want to appreciate, Mark, all of what you're doing right now. A lot of parents are desperate, looking for information. Their kids are almost finishing college. So there's a really desperate need out there. Some of the schools, like you well know, North Forsyth invited you and I to go out there and talk to the parents. So it's a way to inform our community. Again, Mark, thank you so much for doing this portion with me in English, and in a few minutes we'll do it in Spanish as well. So we'll have it for both groups, okay? Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the public?
Miriam, I want to thank you for doing this. I want to tell everybody, remain calm, remain informed, and remain strong, because even though this feels like this is pulling the rug out from under your feet, those who are really starting to establish themselves, be strong, and we're going to see a solution to this.
Thank you so much. To our public, our counselors, our teachers, we are trying our best to get all of this information out there for you. Crosby Scholars has taken that step to say, we need to help our kids. So any information that you might need, please give us a call at 725-5371 so we can get to you all the information you might need, at least just answering some questions that you might have with the answers that our lawyer Mark Atkinson has given us. So we do appreciate this opportunity to come in front of you, talk about this situation, and we just hope that each and every one of our students get through this situation. Thank you so much. This is Miriam Hernandez. Again, Crosby Scholars, 725-5371.